right, I will take over here. Good morning, everyone. So nice to see everybody back. Thank you all for your patience while we get this whole thing figured out with the recording and the Zoom and all the translation channels. This team, I cannot even begin to tell you how hard this team has worked to make this happen, and I so appreciate, so appreciate all of you. Okay, so this morning we're going to talk about how to be less furious and more curious. What does that mean? We're going to get into that in a minute, but our kids are behaving in ways sometimes because they don't know how else to tell us, or because they don't know what else that they can do. And so today we'll talk about how we can look beyond the behavior and try to figure out what's going on. I'm Liz. I work for Young and Healthy. I am going to put in the chat the link to our sign-in sheet. If you would please click on that link and go to the sign-in sheet, and you will enter course number 3032. This is how we make sure we can continue providing these kinds of programs, is through getting feedback from you and being able to document that we have had participants. So please do go to that sign-in sheet. And if one of the staff members actually could go to the sign-in sheet too, that just one of you only has to do it, that would really be helpful. All right, so Young and Healthy is a 31-year-old direct healthcare organization that's been operating nonprofit in Pasadena for the past 31 years. We have been able to provide direct healthcare services to kids who otherwise would not have it, pro bono, free of charge. Nobody gets charged. We have, they go through a volunteer provider. The provider provides the service, and then nobody gets a bill, not Young and Healthy and not the family. And we're able to do this all the way through whatever course of treatment our kids needs through volunteer pharmacies and laboratories, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Really cool. Then we have our insurance enrollment and support. We have a professional on staff who is really great at helping you figure out how to register, how to enroll in your insurance, and then helps support families all the way through the process of using it, because that can be hard too. And then of course we have our trauma-informed care, mindfulness, and our parent education programs, because education is part of prevention. And we know that when we are healthy in mind, we are also healthy in body. Our mental health outcomes and our physical health outcomes are very tightly linked. And so the more education that we can offer to families, the better we can all do for our kids. And that will help with long-term health outcomes as well. Just like all of you, we're trying to figure out how to do this in a different way due to the pandemic. So even though maybe when you can't walk into our Young and Healthy offices, we are still there and still hard. We're working hard there. We're working hard with a new grant as well, our new TOMA grant. We have partnered with Day One to offer a program that helps families to file their taxes and apply for the earned income tax credit. It's not a little bit of money either. If you qualify, you can get up to almost $7,000, right? That's more than a Big Mac. That's a lot more than one Big Mac at McDonald's, right? So if you qualify or you know someone who would qualify, please do reach out to Young and Healthy or Day One, and we will get you connected with the right people so that you can get your taxes filed and get this money in your pocket. So here we are, right? We are going through another big adjustment. Teachers are working at getting ready to have more of a hybrid version of school. So some kids will be in the classroom, some kids will still be at home. And things are starting to open up, right? The other night, I heard somebody, we called to do takeout, and the person on the phone, the taking order, said, we're open for in-person indoor dining. And wow, so that was just another big adjustment for me, right? Like, I have to decide now, do I want to go to a restaurant? You all are having to decide if you want to put your kids in school or keep them in a remote environment, right? That's another really big adjustment. And I love this quote that absurd times call for absurd amounts of love. The way that we're going to get through these big adjustments is with extra, right? A little bit of extra understanding. The question in the chat is, are the teachers required to be vaccinated to teach our kids? The teachers are not required to be vaccinated. It's illegal for them to actually make it a requirement and or to ask for proof of vaccination because of the HIPAA requirement, the HIPAA laws, I mean. So no, it is not required for our teachers to get vaccinated. That's the short answer. Unless someone else has different information, that's what my understanding is. From this connection though, this making sure that we are really applying extra love and understanding and empathy is extra important during this time when we are transitioning, right? We're making big adjustments. We need to be connected. We are made to be connected with one another. Our brains are wired that way. And everything is improved and enhanced when we have that connection, right? And our kids, when they have that connection, are going to make these transitions, these big adjustments, more smoothly. It's going to be easier for them to be able to transition and make adjustments because they feel connected, right? Because their brain is calm. When you feel connected, you're calm. As parents, we can then try to understand them before we try to make sure we're being understood. I know that a lot of times, we're like, just come on, you got to listen to me. I was joking with a friend yesterday. I have a 24 and a 27-year-old. And I was joking with a friend yesterday saying, you got to just kind of let them learn on their own. But it's so hard sometimes because I know what they should be doing. Like if they would just do everything I tell them to do, life would be easy for them, right? It doesn't work that way. And I was joking with a friend. But so first, if we listen and try to understand where they're coming from, what they're experiencing, right? What they're going through before we try to make sure they understand our opinion and our thoughts and what we want them to do. Because people come alive when we listen to them. When our kids feel they want to feel seen, they want to feel heard, and they want to feel valued. And the only way that we can truly do that is to back up a little bit and listen, get to know where they are. Okay, I want to address this. Virginia says, how do we know if our class cohort is safe with the adults around our kids? Well, I know that and I don't know a lot of the safety in and outs. I don't know details, but I do know that our school district is working hard to follow all the guidelines and to meet all of the criteria that will make it the safest possible environment for our kids. And I do think that putting our kids back to in-person learning is something that's very personal. I think families have to make that decision for themselves. So I do understand your reservations, Virginia. As you know, I don't have school-age kids right now, so I can only really imagine how difficult and frightening this must be to do that. But number one is please make this decision for your family because you have to be comfortable. And second of all, know that I do have faith that our school district is doing the best that they can to provide the safest environment that they possibly can. I'm on a lot of meetings, I listen to a lot of stuff, and I do trust them that they are doing the best that they possibly can. But everybody's situation is different. And part of feeling seen, heard, and valued is listening to how your kids feel about going back too. So I wouldn't We want to make sure we're using safety-based language when we talk about this. We want to make sure that our kids know that whatever you decide to do, they will be safe. You will provide for them the best, safest environment, but also listen to what their thoughts and feelings are, right? Make sure that they are heard and seen and valued through this process as well. I don't know if any of you have ever felt this way, but sometimes you feel like you just have to yell, right? Nothing gets done until I yell. Like, you can ask nicely 15 times. On the 16th time, you raise your voice and all of a sudden people move, right? It kind of just happens. So we all get there. We all get to that place where we feel like we have to yell. And that's not really about our kids though, is it? The hard thing about that is that that's really about us. We make the move to yell, right? Because we haven't figured out another way to do it. So we just get to that yelling place, right? And so that's really about us. We learn to make predictions based on our experience. Our brain is a predicting machine. So based on what we have experienced, when something happens, when we're in an environment, when we're learning something new, our brain uses the information it already has to make a prediction about what's going to happen next. Okay, that's how our brains work. And oftentimes, our predictions are based on how to make sure that we stay safe, because that's our brain's biggest job, is to make sure that we're staying safe. Okay, so when we get caught up, though, when something happens, and we either make a prediction that this is not a safe situation, or we feel like what we don't know how to predict because it's a new situation, like, I don't know, everything around this pandemic is a new situation. When our brains don't know what to predict, it can interpret what's happening as danger or confusion because we get uncomfortable. And at that point, those big feelings overwhelm us, right? They have the potential to really overwhelm us. And in those situations, we want to get past what happened and get into what the feelings are around what happened. It's not as important to understand the situation as it is to understand how we feel about it and how those feelings can have the power to dictate our behavior. All behavior is communication. Everything that our kids do, all their behavior is telling us something. Even when they're going along and things are working out really well, it's an indication of what their skill level is. It's an indication of how well the prefrontal cortex is developing and how well they're developing connections in their brain so that they can have that maybe self-control, or they've learned a skill, or they know how to handle something. That's communication as well. But oftentimes the behavior that gets more attention from us as parents is the behavior that's not desirable, right? They're doing something we don't like, we pay a lot of attention to that, right? They get a lot of attention. And we, at times, focus more on the behavior than we do on what's underlying. There's either a skill that needs to be learned or feelings that need to be dealt with when they are exhibiting undesirable behavior, when they're doing things we don't like, right? Our job then is to be less furious, right? Let's try, hard as it is, try not to just go to that angry place right away and try to figure out what's happening. Why are they having a hard time right now? Is there a skill to be learned? Are there feelings to be addressed? So we have to keep looking around, right? Look closely at what's going on. And you oftentimes have to unpack the bags or look underneath the situation to find out what's really going on. One of my other favorite stories is the story of a little boy and his dad and the corner. Some of you may have heard my corner story before, but the story goes like this. There's a little boy who wants to go outside to play. And so he says to his dad, "Can I go out and play?" Dad says, "Sure, you can go out and play. One rule, don't go around the corner. Little boy nods and smiles, goes out to play. Within minutes, he's zipped around the corner. Dad has to come out and tell him, that was the rule. Now you have to come back in. You can't play. I told you not to go around the corner. The next day, same exact thing happens. Can I go out and play? Sure. He goes out, goes around the corner. Dad says, that was the one rule. Now you got to come back in. I told you not to go around the corner. On the third day, same situation. Dad said, little boy says, can I go out and play? Dad says, sure, but listen, buddy, you can't go around that corner. I want to just make sure you understand that. Do you have any questions? The little boy says, yes, I have one question. The question is, what's a corner? Right? So was it that the little boy was being naughty and not listening to his dad? Or was it that he just didn't understand the instructions? And when the dad went a little deeper and asked questions, do you need to know anything? It was the little boy said, yeah, I don't get it, right? So we sometimes as adults, we need to back up and look at, are we being clear? Are we communicating well? Are we telling them what we want them to do? It seems obvious to us that when we say don't go around the corner, we don't want you to go around the corner. But if you don't know what a corner is, you can't follow those directions, right? It's not that the little boy wanted to. He wasn't willfully disobeying his dad if he didn't know what the corner was. I hear this constantly when we were in person schools and throughout all the years that I've worked in schools. I hear people all the time say, don't run, which makes a lot of sense. If I say don't run, what do you guys think I want you to do? Walk, right? That doesn't necessarily equate for our kids. When we say don't run, they only know what we don't want them to do. They sometimes cannot make the leap. They don't have the prefrontal cortex skills to be able to say, oh, don't run. I have another thing I can do, then I can walk, right? We have to tell them walk, or let's go outside and look at the corner. Let's talk about where you can play. So I think we have to just be aware that sometimes we're not clear because our kids developmentally aren't there. And when we look at behaviors, considering, is it development? Is this a normal, developmentally appropriate behavior for this particular child, right? A 2-year-old kind of getting mad and throwing a tantrum because you can't, turn the Jell-O from red to blue, or the granola bar broke when you took it out of the cabinet. Now they don't want to eat a broken granola bar, so now they have a tantrum. That's pretty developmentally appropriate for a 2-year-old, isn't it? But at 7, granola bar breaks, kid throws a crying tantrum. That's not as developmentally appropriate, right, as it is for a 2-year-old. So that's the difference, right? What can we expect from our kids? What's developmentally appropriate? So that's the first thing to consider. Typically, we all go to discipline. The kid is misbehaving because they weren't disciplined enough, right? And who does that put the blame on? The parents, doesn't it? Right? Oh, that kid, we've all heard it. That kid just needs more discipline. Oh, that kid's not. That's why that kid's misbehaving, because he needs more discipline. But is it really discipline, or is it distress? Is it that our kids sometimes get overwhelmed with those big feelings and don't know how to handle it? And so they act out, right? Maybe it's crying, maybe it's hiding. There's a lot of different things. We're going to talk about some of the behaviors you could possibly see that might start to come up again now that we're, that we're adjusting again, now that things are changing around them again. And absolutely, it is normal to see tantrums in lockdown. Our kids experience regressive behavior and overwhelm. And so, yes, I have had many, many tantrums during this lockdown. So yes, it's very normal to see tantrums in lockdown. I mean, really, it's just hard. Yeah, I have them too, Virginia, right? I have them too. I have tantrums as well. They may not look like our kids' tantrums, but I can throw a pretty mean tantrum if I need to, or if I get overwhelmed. It happens. And so there's a lot more to be overwhelmed about, and our kids are regressing in their behavior because of the overwhelm, because they're using more of that midbrain. And most acting out, most of those tantrums can be explained in terms of growth stages or unmet needs, right? Again, behaviors, communication. If we have a need and we don't know how to communicate it, sometimes we act out instead because we don't know how to communicate it. But if we only focus on the behavior and we're not meeting we're not meeting the unmet need, right? We're not finding or identifying the unmet need and figuring out how to meet it. It's just going to go into another behavior, right? So maybe you had a kid who was acting out, and then you come down hard on them in a disciplined way, addressing the acting out, but not figuring out what were the feelings underneath. And now maybe they've withdrawn, right? And now you're like, I can't get this kid to talk to me. Well, they've kind of withdrawn because now that's their unmet, right? That's their next behavior to kind of figure out how to get that need met, okay? And we're seeing this in us as well. When we talk about, we joke kind of about, not really though, about the tantrums, because I do have tantrums, but more often we see these kinds of things in adults or older kids, maybe. Have weird sleep. I had the weirdest dream last night. Weirdest dream. A lot of people are reporting super strange dreams, or lack of sleep, or maybe wanting to sleep too much. Maybe you feel like you, I love it. Okay. Maybe you can't remember stuff, right? Maybe you are just feeling like, I can't remember what's going on. Gonna tease my husband a little here and just say, 3 times today, he asked me, what time are we dropping the car off for service? And then got his keys out to leave 2 hours early. Like, so, right, and that kind of happens. I'm like, where are you going? But that happens because there's a lot going on. We're trying to figure out a lot of things. Our brain's really busy, and it makes us sometimes feel not so productive, or like we have a shorter attention span, or here's the one with parenting, that smaller window of tolerance, right? We might have a shorter fuse. We might get angry a little quicker, right? We don't have as much patience. And we're seeing that a lot. And that's how we're seeing it more in adults and older kids. In our younger kids, you might see aggression or biting or hitting kind of a little more frequently than you had in the past. That's developmentally appropriate sometimes for younger kids. But if our older kids are doing it, it's kind of a regressive behavior. And during this time of transition, remember, we might see some of these behaviors come back. That regressive, because they're regressing. Maybe they're withdrawing or they're being more demanding. Somatic complaints means physical symptoms. If your kid's saying to you, I have a tummy ache, and you're like, how can you possibly have a tummy ache every day? Well, it's really possible. When we are in times of stress, our body produces more cortisol, which then triggers our stomachs to make more acid. And so we have more stomach aches. We see a lot of stomach aches. Or maybe they have headaches, right? A lot of stress, a lot of headache. So yes, you might see some physical complaints. Fear, just being afraid of pretty much everything, or anything. I had a mom the other day say to me that her kids are afraid to go out of the house. I get it. I'm sometimes afraid to go to the supermarket or to go out, to go places. While we are kind of regressing and our brain is busy in our midbrain, we're going to have trouble learning self-regulation. So the neural connections in our brain are not working. They're not getting all the way to where they have to get. We're not practicing them because we're stuck in our midbrain. And so learning self-regulation and new skills can be very hard. Virginia says that her kids ask for hugs about 5 times a day. Yeah, I want to come to your house, Virginia. Yeah, they need that connection. They want that connection, and how cool that they're able to come to you and ask for it, right? That's super special that they're able to come to you and say, I need a hug right now. I need that connection. I need that calming feeling, that co-regulation, right? Awesome. And that will help to see a lot. You'll start to see less of these behaviors the more they feel the connection. Separation anxiety, I think, might become something that you might see in your family because we've been together for so long, right? And now it's like, wait, you're going where? I have to go how? Huh? That might be something you see. And poor social skills. Please remember that our kids have missed a whole year of social development. And so, yeah, it might be a little bit hard for them and it might be a little bit uncomfortable for them when it's time to start being around friends again. So understand that number one, it's hard. Number two, they missed a lot. And so it's going to take time to get them back to where they need to be. And the best thing that we can do is to press the pause button. So take the time, take our time to sit down with them and try to understand what's going on. Don't have this conversation in the heat of the moment, right? We don't want to have this conversation when things are at high intensity. We want to make sure that both we as the parent and our kids are calm when we have the conversation to sit down and try to understand, right? You're not going to be able to do it because your midbrain's taken over. And we'll talk about that more in a second. But the other thing to remember is that when someone feels like you're listening to them, they'll be more open to listening to you, right? It just works that way. If I feel listened to, I'm going to be like, okay, I can hear more what you're saying. I'm calmer. I'm more connected. It's a little bit like getting a hug, right? I listen to you, feels a little bit like getting a hug. I'm calm. So my midbrain doesn't have to take over, right? I'm not feeling unsafe or unsure or uncomfortable or worried. I can let those, kind of get those feelings to calm down so that I can get back, so I can get out of my midbrain, the danger warning center of my brain, and I can get back to my thinking, learning brain, where I can have a great conversation, where I can understand, where I can problem solve. That's what happens up here in that brain. And that's where we want to be when we talk. How do we get our kids back out of their midbrain and back into their thinking, learning brain? Relationship and connection is the first way to do it, right? Listening creates relationship and connection. Leave the judgment somewhere else. Let your kids have their feelings. They get to have their interpretation of what they feel. Be present. Put down your phone. Turn away from your computer. Put down the sponge and stop washing the dishes, right? It's okay to just stop and be really present with your kids when they come to you and need to talk with you about something. Or if they want to tell you a story. Listen, I'm guilty of this still with my husband, with my family, and I did it all the time with my kids. Yeah, I'm listening. Just go ahead, keep talking. And I was doing something else completely, right? I'm on my phone or I'm washing the dishes or I was doing something, cooking dinner. Oh yeah, go ahead, I'm listening. Are you really though? Our brains can't really multitask. I know as parents, we think that we're amazing multitaskers. And there are some things you can do but being really truly present with your kids is one of those things that we can only do if we turn everything else off and focus just on them. It will honestly take less time to do that than it will to go back and try to repair or to deal with the big feelings that might come out of not really hearing what they said. Name it to tame it. Help them to put a name to their feelings because that helps us feel in control. Acknowledge those big feelings. I can tell you, or I hear you're telling me that you feel really disappointed that your friend, you can't go back to school, or that your friend isn't coming back to school. Acknowledge those feelings. Try not to ask too many questions. I do this all the time. I've admitted this before to you guys. I'll think I'm good and I'll keep asking questions until they're like, okay, overwhelmed with the questions. Stop. I just want to talk, right? Try not to get hooked. So if they come to you upset, try not to get hooked into their upset. Try not to get try not to get hooked into feeling what they're feeling. We need to remain calm while we listen to them, and not get angry about it, or not meet their upset with upset, right? Are they upset? It's our job to stay down here in the calm place. Let them know you're listening. Don't minimize what they're telling you. They're allowed to have their own interpretation. I think we talk about that again in a minute, but right, it's a big deal to them, even if it's not a big deal to us. So acknowledging that this is a big deal for you. These are big feelings for you. And they're trying. They really are trying. They're still learning a lot of these skills. They're trying to figure this out. They don't know how to resist temptation. They don't have that. Remember, the part of our brain where we kind of connect with the skill of self-control is way up front. And that part of our brain's not fully mature until we're about 30. Now we need to practice how to resist temptation. We need to practice self-control. And then when we simply insist that it has to be done our way, which is so hard not to do because our way is the right way, right? It becomes a lose-lose situation, right? It could become a contentious situation, and that's not what we want. We don't want conflict. We want our kids we want to listen, right? And we want our kids to feel felt. And the only way that we can make them feel felt is by using a lot of empathy. That's what empathy is. It's helping the other person to feel felt. And what that means is trying to see the world through someone else's eyes. So, okay, maybe that that I don't see that as a big deal, but I can look through your perspective. I can look through your eyes into your world and see that this is hard for you, right? And that's what being empathy is. And you are not ever going to spoil your kids by making them, by using a lot of empathy. You are not going to make them act out or be, right? Okay. 70 to 80% of our communication is nonverbal. And yes, Virginia says, I need to become better at this. I think that was on the empathy slide. Yeah, so do I. I hear you. And it's practice. It's just practice, right? You'll get better. So that nonverbal communication is where I need to practice as well, because I don't know. Okay, my daughter always says to me, Mom, your face is like a book. Like I can read your face like a book. So I have a hard time sometimes, not with the facial expression part. But the other parts of nonverbal communication are eye contact, right? So there's that be present, stop what you're doing and look at your child. The tone of voice that we use, our posture, the gestures we choose, timing of response. Maybe right now is not and not talk about it right now. And then our intensity of response, right? That calmer voice, the calmer, just trying not to react. I think of that, there's a TV show where the dad says to his teenage daughter every time she says something that I would probably have an intense response to, he goes, thank you for telling me that. You know, it's just the intensity is not there. Spoil your kids by listening to them and trying to understand their perspective. We have to allow them to have their own experiences and their interpretation of what happened. And there are some simple questions that we can ask ourselves prior to responding. When we press that pause button and we ask ourselves, is what I am about to say kind? Is what I am about to say helpful? is what I am about to say true? My favorite is what I am about to say necessary. Does this really need to be said right now? These are some great questions that we can even teach our kids to use as a filter before they talk to a friend or a sibling or us or anyone. But so this is a great filter. And when they're having a hard time and you don't know what to say or you don't know what to do, we can ask them, how can I support you right now? Tell me what I can do for you right now that will be helpful, right? And you might be surprised that they have an answer. And they might say, I don't even know right now. They're still then too caught up in their midbrain. So the next thing we can say is then let's let it rest for a bit. Let's let it rest for a few minutes and come back and talk about it later, right? The important part of that is that you come back and talk about it later. Can't say, let's let this rest for a bit as a way to get out of a conversation that you don't want to have and don't want to come back to. Let's take some time for both of us to cool down, for both of us to think for a minute, and then we can come back and talk about it later. And later might be tomorrow. That's okay. Later might be in a couple days, as long as you're checking back in and say, hey, I'm still thinking about that. Let's talk about it later. But then especially with our older kids, we need to let them know, hey, I'm ready to talk about that. Is now a good time for you? They're in the middle of something, they're doing something, you've had the chance to shift gears, they haven't, right? Because timing's everything. And so we can give them constructive feedback at a later time when they're ready for it. We can make sure that we are praising the effort that went into everything that they did and the worth of the person. And when they've done their best, whether it meets your standards or not, they've done their best. We have to recognize, have they done their best? And then make sure that we give them the appreciation and praise. We also call this delegating. I like to delegate, but I really like it when I delegate to someone who's going to do whatever it is exactly the way I would have done it anyway. And that's really hard because not everybody does things exactly the same way. And so saying to our kids, I trust you to do this, and then letting them do it their way, as long as it's done well and to the best of their ability, we need to accept that. Best messages of all are, I love you. I believe that you are a person of infinite worth. And I know that your behavior is just a little bit of who you are. And I love who you are. Where I'm not, you are not your behavior. Right? Those are separate things. Just because you are what I love, right? Those are the messages that our kids need to hear. As parents, we're not going to always get this right. And that's okay. I actually heard my favorite author, which, yes, Virginia, I would love to start a brain development book club. That would be so cool. I'm going to work on that, actually, to be honest with you. I think it's a great idea. But my favorite author, who wrote Whole Brain Child and a number of other books, said at a conference sorry, everybody. I don't know what happened. I got kicked out. Zoom said it can't quit on me or something. So I apologize for that. I don't know exactly where we lost each other, but I am going to try to go back to I'm going to try to go back to the beginning of this mindfulness exercise. We're just going to go with mindfulness for a minute. Okay, everybody ready? So I'm just going to get aware of my breathing for a moment now that my breathing's up, my heart rate's up a little from that experience. So just right now, for me, imagine, what is your favorite color? Is it blue, orange, red, purple? Maybe it's another color. Imagine your favorite color. And now imagine that there's a little ball of your favorite color inside your body. Maybe it's up here where your heart is. Maybe you feel it in your belly, maybe on the top of your head. Wherever you feel this little ball of your favorite color. Now, as you take a deep breath in, imagine that the ball is getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it takes over your whole body. Big, deep breath in. And then as you exhale, imagine that everything around you is your favorite color. And it feels really warm and really good. Everything around you. Take one more long, slow breath in. And let it out through your mouth. Big exhale. Yep. Okay. There you go. And again, as I mentioned, that's from Breathe Like a Bear by Kira Wiley. This book is also available. It's Amazon. I should be getting royalties. And it does come in Spanish. So this is a great one. And then just remember to honor yourself, right? You are what your kids need. You are what we all need. You, right? You are very special. And I just want to make sure you're honoring yourself as parents. Okay, questions, thoughts, comments. Oh, Virginia with pink cotton candy. I love it. I love it. If you didn't have a chance earlier to use the sign-in, that's right there. And it was 3032 is the course number. Anybody, thoughts, questions, comments? Very sorry. Yes, go ahead, Julia. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for your workshops. They're always so helpful. I know that I have got caught up in my emotions when my kids get in their emotions or having a moment, only because I'm always trying to add the discipline component, honestly. That's just how my brain works, because I want to try to teach them something, not just on the emotional level, but I want to keep the discipline. But I've learned a little bit later than sooner, unfortunately, but I'm human, obviously, that the disciplining part has had to go out the window a little bit right now because of what we've been going through in the pandemic. So I've had to reassess my discipline plan, basically, and be a little bit more empathetic with my children, as opposed to trying to prove my discipline that I want them to learn. Honestly, that's where I'm at right now.
Right. No, and I think that that's very appropriate for what we're experiencing right now, but it's also really appropriate maybe to just to continue that once everything seems calmer, right? Our kids, we will always learn better from us if we are connected with them and if we are using that empathy. So while it might seem like, right, that because we're not disciplining them, that they're getting away with stuff, they're actually not. They're just learning in a different way than we were taught, right? I think I did the same thing when my kids were young. I was like, oh, I have discipline, because I want good kids. I want them to listen. I want them to be the best they can be in the world, right? And so they have to be really disciplined. And as I parented, as I learned, and some of the things I learned when my kids were much, much older, they'll learn better from us. They'll learn more from us if they feel connected first. And so, yeah, so I think you're absolutely right, Julia. You're on the right track from my point of view. It's I saw the Excel.
Yeah. No, it's been hard. It's been hard. Like I said, my upbringing, as you mentioned, the discipline, but I've learned quickly in the process that you have to kind of let that go. The letting go is very empowering, because you see that after, like you said, you're making the connection with your child, which is more important than the discipline, because then at a later date, the discipline will kind of appear slowly. I've seen that actually already. So it's just been hard. It's a learning experience. And I thank you for, your valuable information too.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And it is it's a learning experience. I often say to my kids, you're going to have to be patient with me. I've never had a 24-year-old daughter before. Like, this is my first time, right? So it's all learning. And I think they appreciate seeing that we're human and modeling how we kind of problem solve too in that way. Like that we can say, okay, I'm open to growth. I'm open to changing, to doing things differently and what feels comfortable for me. That's great to model for our kids as well. Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I appreciate you sharing, Julia. That's really, it's great for all of us to hear. You know, we're all learning from each other. Fantastic. Yeah. Anybody else have anything? We do. We have to relearn. You're right, Virginia. We have to kind of get past it. I know that my, you know, especially when my kids were little, my in-laws were not about the way I was parenting my kids. Like they were like, what empathy thing? No, there's no empathy. There's no empathy. You just discipline only. What are you talking about? Right? It was really hard for them. And I think now that they have, you know, my kids have grown up, they're like, oh, okay, we get it now. They're starting to come around. It took a while, like 27 years. But, you know, we all have to relearn. We all have to relearn. It's kind of new. All right. You guys are awesome. Thank you for your patience while we dealt with our technical difficulties. I couldn't tell what, I don't know what happened. Zoom just told me that I was not welcome in the meeting anymore. So I don't know if Zoom, if this, you know, the power of Zoom heard something they didn't like me say and said, oh, we're cutting her off. I don't know. All right. You all have a great week. When do we have? One more week before spring break? I think, right? You're welcome, Virginia. You are so welcome. Thank you for being here. Makes a big difference. Really does.